Good morning. Before we get started, we have an announcement from Julie Kirsch about the auction.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I hope you made it here okay, because the hour really threw me off. But I got here with the kids, and I'm somewhat put together. But as she said, I'm Julie Kirsch. I'm part of the auction team. Each week, we're going to try to just remind you and keep the important dates up for you. This time, it's really important to buy your ticket early because there's a discount, so make sure you buy it this month. The auction is Saturday, April 15th. The other second part is we need donations to make the auction successful. Donations include a basket you could put together, a really nice item of value to maybe be in a silent auction, or you could host a party, or if you're really talented at art or photography, those things make really good auction items. So what you would do is go to the beat, there's links in there, and you can sign up to put your item in. All right, so April 15th, make sure you buy your tickets ahead of time and get your donation in. Thank you, everybody.
Welcome to the UU Church of the South Hills, also called Sunnyhill. We're delighted that you could join us for this service. Our mission at Sunnyhill is to create a more just and compassionate community within and beyond our walls. My name is Janie Elliott, and I'm a member of the Beloved Conversations team. If you're a newcomer or a visitor to our congregation, please go to sunnyhill.org and click on the button that says New to Sunnyhill. This way you'll receive more information about our congregation and our email newsletter. Also, if you'd like to be greeted as a newcomer after this service, please take a red mug and members will seek you out to make sure you are warmly welcomed. If you're joining us online today, please say hello or good morning in the comments on Facebook or YouTube. We'd like to hear from you and extend a welcome to you as well. For all those who are here in person, a gentle reminder to quiet your phones, not your children, just your phones, so that we can enjoy this service uninterrupted by buzzing or ringing. We're joined by Reverend Sunshine Jeremiah Wolf for today's service, which is titled, Why an Eighth Principle? The Theology of the Platinum Rule. Unitarian Universalism has a long and complicated history working on anti-racism. In recent years, the Eighth Principle has called congregations to not only proclaim countering oppression, particularly anti-racism, as a value, but to embody it in every aspect of the work that we do. What does it mean to choose this work, and what kind of paradigm shift do we need to continue to embrace it? Reverend Sunshine will help begin to answer these questions through story, principled thought, and song. Reverend Sunshine serves as congregational field staff for the Central East region, which Sunnyhill is a part of. They are originally from Indiana and have served congregations all across the country. They are currently a member of Trust, Transgender, Religious, Professional, Unitarian, Universalist Together, and also DRUM, Diverse, Revolutionary, Multicultural Ministries. Reverend Sunshine identifies as genderqueer and transgender and uses any third gender pronoun. After the service, Reverend Sunshine will lead us in our fifth and final Eighth Principle workshop, so we would encourage everybody to please grab a cup of coffee and then come back to the sanctuary. Thank you.
Good morning. As we are committed to the ongoing work of nurturing beloved community within and beyond our walls, we stand to recognize and honor the African people who were enslaved at the hands of European colonizers. We acknowledge that the growth and development of the United States of America directly results from, and would not have been possible without, the violent enslavement of African people and their descendants. We mourn their loss of life, liberty, and opportunity. We acknowledge that today we continue to benefit in ways we are only beginning to understand from economic, legal, educational, political, and cultural systems that devalue Black lives and that will reward us for acting in ways that deny the humanity of those enslaved African people and their descendants. We recognize as well that we gather together today on the unceded homeland of many indigenous people who made their home in what we today call Mount Lebanon. Today, as the Beloved Conversations team, we wish to express our gratitude to the Council of Three Rivers American Indian Center, whose representatives have agreed to work with us as we develop an appropriate acknowledgement that honors the indigenous people of this land we call home. Love demands and justice requires that we, as individuals and as a congregation, commit to actions that enable us to reckon with this troubling past and its ongoing legacy in the present.
Our opening words were written by Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt. We are on a journey toward redemption. We have lived a year filled with lamentation, with the strength of generations, the failures of the everyday, and the deep down, gritty messiness that is the promise of our salvation. There is inherent goodness that exists between and among us. I want to honor the weary, ragged miracle that is our living tradition.
I was raring to go this morning. Flame, friend of our most What? I can't hear you. Okay. Flame, friend of our most ancient ancestors, we kindle you now in this time, yet in truth you burn always in the unique worth of each person, in this imagination, in the turning of the heart to sorrow or joy, in the call to hope and in the call to justice. Burn bright before us, burn bright within us.
Good morning. Please rise by your spirit to sing our opening hymn, You Gotta Do When the Spirit Says Do. You'll notice we are without accompaniment today, which is my favorite, don't tell Buddy. But I'm a big fan of the a cappella music, so I'm really excited to have John Pollock with us this morning to add some lively percussion. All right, so we're just gonna jump in. Please sing with me. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you gotta do, oh Lord. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. You gotta sing. You gotta sing when the Spirit says sing. You gotta sing when the Spirit says sing. When the Spirit says sing, you gotta sing, oh Lord. You gotta sing when the Spirit says sing. You gotta dance. You gotta dance when the Spirit says dance. You gotta dance when the Spirit says dance. When the Spirit says dance, you gotta dance, oh Lord. You gotta dance when the Spirit says dance. You gotta laugh. You gotta laugh when the Spirit says laugh. You gotta laugh when the Spirit says laugh. When the Spirit says laugh, you gotta laugh, oh Lord. You gotta laugh when the Spirit says laugh. You gotta shout when the Spirit says shout. You gotta shout when the Spirit says shout. When the Spirit says shout, you gotta shout, oh Lord. You gotta shout when the Spirit says shout. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you gotta do, oh Lord. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. Thank you so much. Please be seated.
Good morning, friends. If there are any kiddos with us this morning that would like to come up for our Time for All Ages, now's your chance. Good morning. Good morning, friends. Come on up. All right, we're all situated. Good morning, everyone. This story is called Super Tiny, and it was written by kind of a Unitarian Universalist superstar, at least in my eyes. That's Reverend Sunshine Jeremiah Wolf, who's sitting right over here. Once, there was a little girl named Amanda who loved to help other people. She helped her Papa David and Pappy Caesar to clean the house. She raked up the leaves in our neighbor Jim's yard when he was in pain and couldn't do it himself. And she tutored her friend Sarah in math. So when it came time for her class project where she was supposed to be helping people in her hometown, she was really excited. Her teacher, Mike, assigned each student a community of people that they should help. Some would help people living with illness. Some would clean yards for those who not clean their own. Each project was a little bit different. Teacher Mike told Amanda that he would like to help people in Walden. That's kind of in the poorer part of town, and they're hungry. He said, "You can do any kind of service project you like, but I want you to help those that are hungry." Amanda couldn't wait. She thought all day about what she could do. When she got home, she told Papa David and Pappy Caesar about the project. "I want to make sandwiches and take them to the people who are hungry." Papa David and Pappy Caesar and their neighbor Jim and her friend Sarah made 100 sandwiches for the poor people in Walden. The next day, Pappy Caesar drove with Amanda to Walden. She had placed each sandwich in a bag with a piece of fruit. She tried handing out all of those sandwiches, but no one seemed very interested in them. Pappy Caesar couldn't explain to her why no one wanted the sandwiches. She offered them to people who were young and old, brown and white, friendly and rude. But the answer was always the same. "Oh, I ate earlier, but thank you." Then she saw another girl about her age. The little girl seemed to be watching Amanda, observing her with a look of laughter and curiosity. Amanda approached the little girl. "Would you like a sandwich?" The little girl looked at her for a moment and then said, "Aren't you going to ask me my name?" Amanda was a little embarrassed. "Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Amanda. What's your name?" "My name is Tiny." The name was clearly appropriate. The girl was tiny. "Why are you handing out sandwiches?" "Well, it's a class project. I was asked to help those who are hungry here in Walden. So my Papa David and Pappy Caesar and Jim and Sarah and I made sandwiches to give to everyone." Tiny laughed. "Well, we do get hungry sometimes, but we never take food from strangers. Some of my neighbors go to the soup kitchen each evening." She paused to laugh some more. Then, "Your teacher really asked you to help the hungry?" Amanda was a little upset that Tiny thought this was so funny. Without really thinking, she blurted out angrily, "Well, what would you do then?" She didn't mean to get so mad, but she didn't like that someone thought her being helpful was funny. Tiny stopped laughing and looked seriously at Amanda. "You really want to help us?" Amanda nodded, but didn't speak because she was too mad. "Well, we have a garden that the city gave us. They gave us seeds, but most of the seeds were bad or not food that any of us will be able to eat much of, like turnips. Do y'all like turnips?" Mm-mm. Oh, Miss Mary likes turnips. They're an acquired taste. "Yuck, who needs 1,000 turnip seeds?" Amanda laughed. Apparently Mary wants 1,000 turnip seeds. Tiny explained that what they really needed were healthy seeds for foods that her community would eat and tools to help dig up the land and water the garden. Tiny said that if Amanda really wanted to help, she could get her class and her dads and her friends to write letters to the city council asking that a grocery store be put in the neighborhood because the closest one was 45 minutes away by bus. Tiny and Amanda talked for a long time, and not just about the needs of Walden. They both like to jump rope and sing songs and make bird calls. Poppy Caesar spent time chatting with Tiny's mom, and soon the two families were friends. Amanda decided that her project would be to ask her church, her class at school, her family, and her friends to come down to Walden and ask the people what they needed. They helped the community get the tools and seeds for the garden and shared a big harvest meal in the fall. It would take a long time, but eventually they would help get a grocery store in Walden. They had a big festival to celebrate their success together. Amanda learned a big lesson that day. She learned that you cannot decide what people need help with. You have to ask them what they need for you to do and then do that thing. She also learned that sometimes, if you ask a stranger what they need, you just might make a friend. And with that, we will head to our RE classes, and thank you, Reverend Sunshine, for this story.
Please join me in singing them out. As you go, may joy surround you. As you go, go in peace. Know our love is with you always. As you go, as you go.
Good morning. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love. This is a song by Reverend Dr. Rebecca Ann Parker, and it's based in a Tonglen practice. And in Tonglen, which is a Buddhist practice, you start by praying for yourself. And then after you've prayed for yourself, if there's a particular need you have, you think of another person who might have a similar need, and you pray for them. And then you pray for all people who might have that similar need. And then you always return to the self, grounding in the body. So it's this slow reaching out to community and then returning back to the self. Does that make sense? There is a love holding me. We have long understood that the universalism that we have inherited has always had grounded in it the notion that love is the center of all things. That a loving God could never damn people to hell, and so therefore hell must not exist, was the concept back in the 17 and 1800s, which is what led a lot of Christian communities to calling them heretics. Any of you have been called a heretic for being a Unitarian Universalist? I have. Yep. The Unitarians similarly believed that it was about our relationships, how we are present to each other. And as Alice Blair Wesley writes about the founding document that led to Unitarianism called the Cambridge Platform, she said, what would it mean if we understood that all things lead to love? All paths lead to love. And that that's not easy. It takes time, and there's always more to learn about love. And it isn't easy. How many of you are in a relationship or have ever been in a relationship, have a sibling, have a really close friend, anything where you know you're particularly close with someone? Have you liked them all of the time? Right? There's the biblical quotation that says, love is gentle, love is kind, which is sweet and wonderful to say at a wedding, and is a constant practice to make happen, right? I love my partner to death, but he still tries to talk. 5 years he's been with me, still tries to talk to me before I've had coffee. He should know better. And I am not kind. And I still love them, right? We still choose to love one another, even if we don't always like each other, even if we don't always agree. And honestly, I think that is one of the most significant things about Unitarian Universalism. So many communities say we have to believe the same thing or think the same way and get into this fundamentalist notion that theirs is the right path, right? And yet we dare to say, no. We all have different ways of thinking and different ways of being, and that is miraculous. And when we practice not agreeing with each other, but still choosing to love one another, that we can model that for a world that too often uses our differences to divide us, right? So this is what brings me to the platinum rule. What's the golden rule? Anybody? Or everybody? Right, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Except as in the example with my partner, he would have me have a wonderful, vibrant conversation with him 5 minutes after I woke up, and I would not. I do not want to be treated as he wishes to be treated, and they do not wish to be treated as I wish to be treated. Some of this may sound familiar to some of you in your relationships in your life, right? The golden rule is great, and it's a good place to start to understand that we need to care about each other. But we have to go deeper. We have to keep moving forward in our learning and our growth. And so there's the platinum rule. It's kind of the next level. And the platinum rule says, treat others as they would have you treat them. So, for example, for the safety of my relationship, my partner knows that my door closed means leave me the heck alone first thing in the morning. I have a coffee mug, I'm going to swear now, so if you have kids in the room, you might cover their ears, that says, I am a ray of fucking sunshine. And it's a reminder when I hold it up to him to leave me alone, because I want him to treat me as I want to be treated in that moment. Just as soon as I'm awake enough, I need to go to him and say, okay, what are the 500 things you've thought of since you've been awake that you need to download to me right now, and let's have that conversation, right? We treat each other in relationship, knowing that we don't need the same things at the same times, but we will do our best to be present to each other, right? We choose love every time we can. And if you think about our story with Super Tiny, too often we go into communities thinking we know what's best. But oftentimes, particularly if you come from privileged communities that maybe have resources and psychological safety and the other kinds of things that come from being able to be in privileged space, you can't know what a community needs unless you talk to them. And it's not like every poor community needs the same thing, or every person of color needs the same thing, or every person living with a disability needs the same thing. We all have different needs, different experiences. And so we have to be willing to listen to each other, to figure out what would be helpful, what would be most beneficial. And so it starts in that I place. What do I need? What don't I know? What helps me ground myself so that when I encounter a different person, I'm able to be curious rather than presumptive, that I'm able to be witness to our difference and to say yes to that rather than going to that comfortable place of sameness. That comfortable place of sameness often creates friction. An example, we have a lot of young adults in our communities. Oftentimes a young adult attends church for the first time, and depending on their age, they're likely to get asked this question: where do you go to college? Curious enough question, seems harmless, unless the person didn't go to college, has no interest in it. But the presumption in the question creates friction and separation, where the intention was to create connection. Does that make sense? So one of the ones that really causes friction is, what do you do for a living? Well, if the person just got fired from their job, or they can't work right now, or work is not a comfortable place to talk about, we've unintentionally created friction when we meant to create curiosity and connection. Does that make sense? And that's just on everyday questions. Never mind when you start to get into things like, oh, we never have any black people here. That's been said in UU churches before. Or, wow, I see that, you're in a wheelchair. That must be really difficult. Which, right? But these are things that have been said in actual UU churches. We had a Unitarian Universalist minister who's Latinx. It was a Sunday off. He was in a different city than he usually is. He went to church, and because it was a Sunday off, he wore jeans and a nice white t-shirt. And he walked into the congregation, UU church, and they said, oh, the soup kitchen is downstairs, and tried to direct him that way. Because they made assumptions about who he was based on his appearance. And all of these create friction and difference. As a trans person, I frequently get asked what surgeries I've had. How often do you ask people about their genitalia? It's not appropriate, right? Creates friction rather than connection. So the thing that we have to pay attention to is that even if our questions and our wonderings are innocent, they can really create division when we really want to create connection. Asking yourself, how do they want to be treated, requires that we place their needs and their interests ahead of our own curiosities of mind and other things that we may get into. And we all have a tendency to do this. It doesn't matter what community you come from. It's a human thing. One of my favorite philosophers is a Jewish philosopher named Emmanuel Levinas. I will not quote Levinas to you. It took me 6 weeks to read one chapter of his work, okay? And only because it was an assignment in seminary. But his point is so meaningful. He says that we have an inherent allergy to difference. We don't know how to deal with it. We look for sameness because that feels safe, right? And we often want safety and comfort. But the thing is that it's actually in the places of our difference where the sacred exists. And so he said, for example, if I'm chatting with you and I suddenly start to hear you, not for what I think you're saying, but what you're actually saying, that space between us is where God lives. Now, whether you believe in God or not, and I know not everybody does, I don't, there is something that's sacred in that space where we really try to understand the person for where they are. And we may not fully, here's a fun science fiction word, grok it. If you know, you know. Grok simply means really deeply understand it. And you may not. But the goal is at least to strive for that, right? To strive for that connection, that relationship. So in the second part of the sermon, I'll talk a little more about how this relates to the eighth principle, but I want us to be thinking about what does it really mean to be curious in a way where we put the relationship and the needs of the person who's in front of us ahead of our own wonderings and our own desires for connection. How might we think differently? What questions might we ask differently? Instead of asking, what do you do for a living? You might ask, wow, what's bringing you joy these days? What kinds of things bring curiosity to you? You can ask an autistic person, my partner's autistic, what's your special interest right now? And you will get a book. And it's amazing, right? But thinking carefully about what questions actually bring connection and not friction. Develop relationship so that that love, that compassion that we so celebrate as Unitarian Universalists moves into a deeper, more nuanced understanding of what it means to be human and to be connected. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love.
help in singing another song right now called Rise. Yeah, we got lyrics. I taught this to the choir this morning without the lyrics, and it was really fun. So we're already ahead of the game. Please be my echo. Rise in step, one by one. Sing it out. Rise in step, one by one. My turn. When all our voices sing out loud, it can be done. When all our voices sing out loud, it can be done. My turn. I know it begins with me. Sing it out. I know it begins with me, so that one day soon we'll all be truly free. So that one day soon we'll all be truly free. All together now. Rise in step, one by one. When all our voices sing out loud, it can be done. I know it begins with me, so that one day soon we'll all be truly free again. Rise in step, one by one. When all our voices sing out loud, it can be done. I know it begins with me, so that one day soon we'll all be truly free. Sing it out. Rise in step, one by one. When all our voices sing out loud, it can be done. I know it begins with me, so that one day soon we'll all be true. Let's take it up now. Rise in step, one by one. When all our voices sing out loud, it can be done. I know it begins with me, so that one day soon we'll all be truly free. Loving the harmony. Rise in step now, one by one. It must be done now. It begins with me, so that one day soon we'll all repeat that last line. So that one day soon we'll all be true again. So one day soon we'll all be truly free. One more. So one day soon we'll all be truly free. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Liz Baldoni. I'm one of the co-chairs of Sunnyhill's Caring Team, which offers support to Sunnyhill members who are going through challenging times. If you'd like to know more about that, you can find me anytime. Each week at this time, we share joys and sorrows submitted by members of the congregation. Joys and sorrows may be submitted online from our website, sunnyhill.org, or by filling out a paper form in Fellowship Hall. It's right by the front door. After each joy or sorrow that I read, please respond by saying, "We hold you in our hearts." A joy from Carol Carl. Carol received a caring card signed by members of the congregation last week. She says, Thank you for the beautiful card with warm, loving messages shining throughout from so many friends. It is much appreciated, and I am especially touched. To Carol, we hold you in our hearts. A sorrow from Joe Shaughnessy. Joe says, my coworker Ron Fox's dad passed away last weekend. He was well into his 80s and suffering from dementia. To Joe's friend Ron and his family, we hold you in our hearts. A sorrow from Janie Elliott. Janie's aunt has entered hospice care for end-stage liver disease. Please keep Janie and her cousins in your thoughts. To Janie and her cousins, we hold you in our hearts. A joy from Chris Simsick. Chris says, spending today with my sister, honoring her for her birthday and expressing gratitude. She is the one who taught me the importance of exercise and nutrition. She always nurtured my creativity. She has shown me places in the world I would not have seen without her. Most of all, she took the time to know me, even if I was just a kid. Happy birthday, Judy. To Chris and her sister Judy, we hold you in our hearts. As Mary leads us in our musical meditation, we invite anyone who feels moved to do so to come forward, light a candle, place it in the sand, and then return to your seat.
Carol Slomsky is going to help me sing this one. This is another new one. These are coming from a workshop that I participated in on community singing, so I'm excited to bring some of these songs to you. We'll sing it a couple times through, and then please join in. And again, if you feel so moved, please come up and light a candle. Start there.
Fear not the pain, let its weight fall back into the earth, for heavy are the mountains, heavy are the seas. Fear not the pain, let its weight fall back into the earth, for heavy are the mountains, heavy are the seas. Fear not the pain, let its weight fall back into the earth, for heavy are the mountains, heavy are the seas. Fear not the pain, let its weight fall back into the earth, for heavy are the mountains, heavy are the seas. Fear not the pain, let its weight fall back into the earth, for heavy are the mountains, heavy are the seas. This is a reading from Uprooting Racism, How White People Can Work for Racial Justice by Paul Kivel. We can learn to notice the culture of power around us. Recently, I was giving a talk at a large Midwestern university and was shown to my room in the hotel run by the university's hotel management department. When I had put my suitcase down and hung up my clothes, I looked around the room. There were 2 pictures on the wall. One was of a university baseball team from many years ago. 22 white men wearing their team uniforms. The other picture was of a science lab class. 14 students, 13 white men, and 1 white woman dressed in lab coats and working at lab benches. In total, I had 35 white men and 1 white woman on the walls of my room. This clearly tells me who's in charge at this university, I said to myself, and it would probably send a message to many of color and white women who stayed in that room that they could expect to be excluded from the culture of power in this institution. The problem with a white culture of power is that it reinforces the racial hierarchy. As white people, many of us expect to have things our way, the way we are most comfortable with. We may go through life complacent in our monoculturalism, not even aware of the limits of our perspectives, the gaps in our knowledge, the inadequacy of our understanding. We remain unaware of the superior status and opportunities we have simply because we are white. Of course, a white culture of power also dramatically limits the ability of people of color to participate in an event, a situation, or an organization. They are only able to participate on our terms, at our discretion, which puts them at a big disadvantage. They often have to give up or hide who they are to participate in our culture. And if there are any problems, it becomes very easy to identify the people of color as the source of those problems and blame or attack them rather than the problem itself.
There is a love holding you. There is a love holding all that you love. There is a love holding all. You rest in this love. So Unitarian Universalism has a long, complicated history when it comes to oppression. Unitarians and Universalists were outsiders by their nature, and yet at the same time, Unitarians helped create what would become middle-class white culture in the United States in very literal ways. They helped define. And many of the people who were leaders in Unitarianism, especially, were also slave owners, were also people who participated in what's called the triangle trade, who benefited from their whiteness and from their academic education. And so we have inherited that piece, but we have also inherited the resistors, and we have inherited the wisdom of people of color who have long served, even 200, 300 years ago in Unitarian Universalism. So if we only tell the white story, we miss this whole other piece, right? So the other part of this story that I really want to lean into about the eighth principle is kind of how we got here. So in Unitarian Universalism, in the 1960s, we were very active in the civil rights movement, and we were also very against it. And by that, I mean that a number of our congregations were very active in the civil rights movement and supported their ministers and their leaders. And so when Dr. King made this call for ministers to come to Selma, Alabama, and march, many of our ministers said yes, and many of our congregations said yes. One of the folks who said yes is Viola Liuzzo, who was born and raised in California, Pennsylvania, who would go to Selma and later be murdered for actively helping folks get to and from the airport, particularly black folks. We have a lot of people who serve, but we also have a lot of congregations who removed their ministers from their pulpits because they marched in Selma, or who threatened and said, you can't do this because it will divide the country, was the language, right? And so in the late 1960s, at a General Assembly, and for those who don't know, General Assembly is our annual gathering where we make all the decisions about the denomination. The next General Assembly is going to be here in Pittsburgh at the end of June. And so there will be somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 Unitarian Universalists in town, wreaking havoc as we do. At the one in 1969, there was a huge conflict. And literally, there are books this thick that tell this story. So you're getting the very, very short version of it, which is this. We committed $1 million to a black institution within Unitarian Universalism. If you've heard of the documentary Eyes on the Prize, that was paid for out of those funds. It funded a lot of black-centered projects. But there were others in the community who said, no, we need to support projects that have black and white folks working together. There was a huge conflict, and at the General Assembly, 3/4 of the assembly walked out when it was decided that the $1 million would be rescinded in its giving. And after that, two things happened. One, in 1970, a similar referendum supporting gay and lesbian rights happened, and folks were so afraid that we'd have another conflict like that one, it went through without a problem. And the second thing is, we didn't talk about race in Unitarian Universalism as a national movement for 30 years. We also lost a whole lot of leaders who said, if you're not going to deal with race, we can't be a part of this movement. Fast forward to 1991. We're having General Assembly in North Carolina, and the organizers decide to organize something called a Thomas Jefferson Ball. Now, if you don't know, Thomas Jefferson was not really a Unitarian. He was like attending church, but not fully in support of us. But he was also a pretty significant slave owner, and a pretty horrific one at times. And quite literally wrote the book on encouraging people to buy slaves from Virginia that encouraged science to prove that people of color were lower in status than white people. So he has a lot to make up for. So we called this thing the Thomas Jefferson Ball, and folks were asked to come in attire that would have been worn at balls in the early 1800s. Might seem innocent enough to you, but if you're a black person, what do you wear to the Thomas Jefferson Ball? And so a couple of our leaders said, do you want me to show up in a loincloth and chains? Is that what you're asking me to do? Because again, you remember what I was saying before? The intentions were good, but the ask caused friction because it didn't consider everybody in the room, right? And that began what we call the journey towards wholeness. And so if you look at the eighth principle, I think it's going to come up. We affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness. That's where that language comes from. The very first anti-racism work we started doing in the early 90s to talk about what it means to be a community that is as diverse as we are and says, we're not going to keep allowing these moments of friction and then therefore harm to continue to occur. Does that make sense? And since then, a lot has changed. I will tell you, so I'm a white passing person of color. I'm Indigenous, Eastern Cherokee, Seminole, and white. And as part of that community, I attend a lot of our BAPOC events. In 2007, I attended an event called Finding Our Way Home, which is for religious professionals of color. There were 36 of us in attendance at that gathering. That gathering has been happening every year. In recent years, as many as 300 people can show up to it. So between 2007 and now, you get a sense of the difference. We're seeing more and more folks choosing to stay. We're seeing more and more transgender folks choosing to stay, even though many do not choose to come out in their congregations. We're seeing more folks who live with disabilities, both visibly clear and also invisible, being in service, engaging in leadership, choosing our congregations. But it has been after a whole lot of work. Out of all of this history, Paula Cole-Jones, who helped create the 8th Principle with Bruce Pollock Johnson, started to realize that you could believe the 7 principles. And if you don't know the 7 principles, they're in the front of the gray hymnal. You can find them on our UUA website. That you could think that we should live by the 7 principles and never have to deal with racism at all. And that that's not okay. And so she and Bruce wrote the 8th Principle with a key piece in there which says, by our actions, saying that not only are we going to say a thing, but we're going to do a thing. And that's caused a little bit of friction, because asking us to do a thing means we have to be willing to move out of that comfortable place. But asking us to do a thing is also saying we're going to choose to be in relationship. We're going to choose to reduce that friction. We're going to choose to say yes to people who don't think, look, believe, or even love like us. And we're going to do that because our world needs it. Yeah? I don't know about you all, but I think our world needs that. It needs models of difference. It needs models that say that our difference is holy and sacred and powerful and a gift to all of humanity. And that while same may feel safe, different makes us strong. Different transforms us. Difference helps us imagine something beyond what we could possibly know. Julica Herman de la Fuente, Julica, just remember Julica, is a major leader in Unitarian Universalism, definitely one of our UU rock stars. And one of the things that she talks about in doing this kind of anti-oppression work, and I don't care what your social location is, everyone has a place where they may have privilege more than someone else. We all have work to do in this. It isn't like it's just one group or another. One of the things she talks about, if you imagine all of human knowledge as a circle, and if you're a philosopher or a scientist, yes, I know not all human knowledge fits in a circle. This is for illustrative purposes. If you imagine all of human knowledge, maybe a fifth of that is what you know that you know. It's the information you're like, yes, I know how to tie my shoes. I know how to communicate. I know how to, I have too many songs memorized, but I know them. Whatever it is, you know the things you know. And then maybe another third of that is the stuff you don't know. Like, I know that physics is out there. I don't know anything about it, right? I know that accounting firms that work with multi-billion-dollar organizations are out there. No clue what they do, right? We all have things we know it exists, but we don't know. But that other 2/3 is the stuff we don't know that we don't know. And we live, many of us, maybe not all of us, but many of us, in a culture that invites us to lean on what we do know. Which is why when I tell someone I'm Indigenous, their first response is often to start to tell me the history of my people. Which again, creates friction. They don't mean it to, but they're going to what they know. Because that feels safe. Because there's something uncomfortable in meeting someone like me and not thinking Indian and getting confused. Same thing with trans. They may start going with what they know. Have you ever noticed yourself do that? You're like, this is uncomfortable. I want to talk about something that's familiar. It's a normal human response. But again, it creates that friction that prevents connection and relationship. So our 8th principle is asking us to lean into the reality that much about oppression is in that world of what we don't know that we don't know. Experiences of others that we cannot possibly understand, even if we try. We can imagine it, that moves us closer, but it doesn't get there. What does get there is choosing to be in relationship with the communities of people who do know their experiences, who do know what needs to happen next, are willing to be co-creative with us about the world we want to create. Does that make sense? You can answer me. If you don't, just shake your head. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. I want you to read this with me. By reading it, you are not committing yourself to it. I'm not asking for your agreement. It's just an exercise to help with comprehension. We affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Now, I do want to be clear. The oppressions, things like racism, transphobia, fat phobia, neurotypical ability making, all those sorts of things, are systemic. No one person here created it. So when you start to feel it become personal, be like, where did I learn to make it about me? Because it isn't. It's about systems that we inherited long before we arrived. As the song goes, we didn't start the fire, right? But we did inherit it. When we talk about white supremacy culture, we're talking about systems. We're not talking about our personal beliefs or values. And because it's the water we all swim in, all of us are impacted. And so the thing you can control is you in that situation and who you choose to be in community with. And those communities have massive power to change things. But just think about Indigenous folks like myself, African American or Black folks, folks from various communities who have been doing the work to dismantle racism for centuries. This is not going to get done in your lifetime. So you need to imagine this is for the long haul. This 8th principle is saying we're committing the resources of our faith because we value relationship so that we can affect a change that we may never see, but hopefully leaves it better for our children and our children's children, right? That's what's being asked. Not that we immediately fix everything now, because that's just not possible, but that we commit to being in it for the long run. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. Keep singing it with me. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all I rest. I'll sing you, but take a look around the room as you're able. There is a love. Hold. Really, look around. Nobody's going to bite you. There is a love holding all that you love. Wave at the people in the camera. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love. Please rise as your spirits and bodies allow. We. There is a love holding us. Turn to face one another. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. And then always end with the self. There is a love. I rest in this love. Please be seated. Blessed be.
It is time for our morning offering. We don't have a designated offering this morning, so our collection will benefit Sunnyhill and will help defray our operating expenses. If you'd like to make a gift via our online giving system, you can do so by going to sunnyhill.org and click on the button that says Online Giving, and then follow the instructions. Or you can give by text at 412-324-3130. Text the amount of your gift and the word pledge if you want your payment to apply to your 2023 Sunnyhill pledge. Otherwise, text gifts will go toward our general operating fund. You can also mail a check if you prefer, and you can find our mailing address on our website, sunnyhill.org again. For those of you who are here with us in person, we'll be passing our offering baskets in just a moment. Thank you, everyone, for your generosity.
We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seed Extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
I always feel it's risky to give the ministers the last word, but here we are. I invite you to turn again and first let's wave at our folks online and welcome them. We are so glad you're able to be with us in this virtual way. Another wonderful way we build connection rather than friction of distance, right? And I invite you to look around the room. And when you do this, to think about this is your community, right? These are people you've chosen for good or ill, right? And you may not like all of them. That's okay. We don't come here to like everybody. We come here to practice in community what it means to be deeply human so that we can model it in a world that desperately needs that wisdom. You choose each other. You choose this space because it gives love, and that love reaches out and ripples and ripples and ripples, helping heal our world. So I ask you this, do you choose this community? Yes. Maybe you don't, that's okay. Let me ask again, do you choose this community? Yes. Do you choose to build love together? Yes. Do you continue to choose relationship even when you're mad at each other? Yes. That one's always a little less, right? May you carry that sacred yes, that choice of one another, so that we may help build worlds of connection in so many systems that try to tear us apart. May it be so. Blessed be. Go in peace and cause really good trouble in the world. If you want to hear much more of me or you want to hear from each other, come back after you get coffee.